All right, thanks, Ken. Great to have everybody here today. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you guys. We've got a great panel on forward-looking infrastructure and digital transformation. Trimble is proud to be a part of this event, proud to sponsor this event. If you don't know Trimble, check us out. Our little slogan that we have is Trimble is transforming the way the world works. And we've done this in a number of industries. One of those interesting industries is agriculture. Not necessarily related to construction, right? But in agriculture, everything from planting to harvesting to plowing to fertilizing is now automated. And Trimble has been a big part of that automation. That's what we're doing with construction. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the many elements that we brought together with dozens of different systems and tools from planning, design, procurement, construction, operations, and maintenance. That Trimble has now all under one umbrella, and that we are integrating and working together to really deliver what you call a capital program management system that is part of an overall life cycle, right, from the planning into the operations side. So with that, I want to hand things over to my esteemed panelists. Glad to have you guys here today. And Andrew, ask you to introduce yourself. Here you go.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Liu with AECOM. I'm the Director of Growth for Transportation in the Western United States, which covers 31 states from as far west as Hawaii to east from Ohio down to Louisiana. So I'm happy to be here today. Also, you might be wondering why I'm on a digital panel. Have had some digital experience myself. Worked at another company in the past leading their digital solutions. Currently sit as the chair for emerging technologies for ITS Americas, and also involved with Smart City Works Venture Studios, which is a technology venture investment arm that's looking at investing in technology companies in the infrastructure space. So happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam Carr. I'm the Department Manager of Revenue and Grants Administration at the Orange County Transportation Authority. And just a little bit about myself. In my current role at OCTA, I oversee all the external revenue that comes to OCTA, including federal, state, local sales tax, as well as the fare revenues that we collect from the bus operations at OCTA. Been with OCTA for about 9 years now. I've held different positions in different divisions, and currently, in my current capacity, I work for the Finance and Administration Division. And again, really happy to be here to talk about OCTA and what we've got in the works. Thank you.
I think it's hot. Good morning. My name is Veronica Vargas. I am the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Tracy. I also am the chair of a brand new transportation transit district called Valley Link. And I sit in the California Legal Cities as the Transportation Communications and Infrastructure Chair. I have the pleasure today not only to represent my city, but 440 cities that I collaborate and work with on a daily basis to bring technology, infrastructure, and communications possibilities. So look forward to having a robust conversation. Pleasure.
Good afternoon, everybody. Miguel Sanglang. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Street Lighting for the City of Los Angeles. Formerly, I was the Deputy Mayor for Budget Innovation, two words that you usually don't find next to each other. But I do like to consider myself someone that works on making sure that some crazy ideas don't happen and others do. And I'm here talking about digital transformation because we, as the Bureau of Street Lighting, have about 220,000 assets throughout the entire city that is connected with about 9,000 miles of conduit and 27,000 miles of copper and other things, including fiber. And so as we're talking about 5G and other things, those are pieces where our infrastructure in the right-of-way is having a little bit more to say, so no longer standing kind of quietly in the night.
All right, thanks, Miguel. So first, to set the table, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what is digital transformation, right? So what do you do when you want to talk about something? You Google it, right? So one definition I found is digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new or modify existing business processes, culture, and customer experiences to meet changing business and market requirements. This reimagining of business in the digital age is digital transformation. So Andrew, you've got some experience with this. You've got some experience with this in our industry. You want to tell us a little bit about the current state of where things are at?
Sure, thank you, Matt. Actually, it's kind of funny. I actually think it's refreshing to hear budget and innovation together, because that is definitely one of the things that is, I think, in my mind, most important when it comes to digital infrastructure transformation in the infrastructure space. So when I was thinking about today, there's kind of three things I wanted to talk about. One is just where do I see the industry is right now, the infrastructure industry when it comes to digital. What is the role the existing ecosystem is playing right now, what are some recommendations and thoughts? And then finally, what is the role of new technology companies, or not new technology companies, but how technology companies work with the existing ecosystem? So, with that, I'll start with the first one, is just my thoughts on where things are. I think it's safe to say that we're all here in the room today, and we're actually on a panel here talking about it, that probably every engineering firm, every owner agency out there is at a minimum digital curious, I would say. And many of them are on different steps along their way of actually carrying out their digital transformation. As an industry, though, I think I would venture to say that I don't think there's been any one company necessarily, or organization, that's had it all figured out quite yet altogether, right? So, and that's part of the journey that we're on here today. And so that leads me to the second thought is, when it comes to the existing companies, whether it be engineering firm or a planning firm, whatever it may be, the professional services firm that work for the agencies or the agency themselves, I think it really all comes down to change transformation. So on the professional services side, I really look at it and I see, as designers, as planners, as engineers, as architects, we all, we're very technical people by nature. We do custom solutions. We've actually even dabbled in digital sometimes, doing some custom digital solutions that solve some problems. But where we've had challenges really is looking at, number one, how do we look broader strategically at deploying that across an entire ecosystem, if you will? How do we actually think about commercializing these, making them products, and how do we scale these solutions? And then on the owner side, I think a lot of the challenges that we see oftentimes are, some would describe, there's a terminology, pilot project paralysis, right? So there's a lot of different tests, a lot of different trials that are being conducted, but how do we go from that pilot project and turning it into something that can be implementable across a broader system? So those are the things I think we really need to think about in the next 5-10 years, as we really think about the technology barriers are not the ones that are going to stop us from seeing some of these solutions that we envision from taking place. And so that leads me to my final point, is thinking about, well, where is the role of companies like Trimble and technology, traditionally focused technologies companies sit? And I think a lot of that part is the partnerships that need to occur between the Trimbles and the AECOMs or the OCTAs of the world. And I think the best way to illustrate this is one example, right? I like your definition of digital transformation, and I think about back in 2006, I was managing an engineering group on a large transit tunnel project, and we were in the middle of designing this when halfway around the world there was a major collapse in Singapore. It was the Nickel Highway construction. I don't know, probably many of you in this room have heard of it. I see a few nods. So this was a major collapse that happened back in 2006, and here I am in the middle of managing this team, designing a very similar structure. And the agency, the Land Transport Authority of Singapore, commissioned a whole commission of inquiry. Everyone went over there. I went over there as well. And as part of that commission of inquiry, what we found out was a failure in this industry is never just one thing, right? And in this case, there was issues with the structural design. There were issues with the actual construction materials. There were inefficiencies maybe in the quality control and the construction management. And the last thing was there was also issues with the actual data, right? The instrumentation data. So what was happening there was once a week, the management team would meet on a Friday. They would do a regular meeting to look at the performance of the past week during construction. And every single day, there would be a field engineer who would go and read all the data, using his data loggers, using his clipboard, and doing all this, going back to the office at night, putting into an Excel, and Thursday night, prepare a nice plot for the management team to look at on Friday afternoon for the weekly meeting. What happened here in Singapore was this actually collapsed on a Thursday afternoon. So one day before the action management meeting occurred, and if you look at, as part of the committee of inquiry, what we found was that you could have seen as early as Tuesday that this collapse was going to happen, and it could have been prevented. And there were 4 lives that were lost on that construction project, right? So I look at, despite the fact that I'm on the ITS committee, I look at all the things we're doing with connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, digitizing smart cities. And to me, I take it, I think we need to do better as an industry. The technology to prevent that is here today. It has been here for a while, but we're still doing it this traditional way that I just described in Singapore, right? So I think it's really talking about how do we come together as industry, really to find, not just to look at technology for more futuristic things, but how do we improve what we're doing today as a group here? And realize I probably sound a little bit like I'm standing on a soapbox about safety from this perspective, but realize it's actually good for the owners as well. If you look at, Sam, for the overall, capital project program at OCTA as example, so let's take Trimble for example, right? When we're actually designing things, and if we could put them into Quantum or SketchUp that Trimble has, right? Or we could put them into this big database that you guys have with Quadri. You guys have all of the technology, all the instruments. You could have a single source of truth where you look at this now, say, I designed it, I'm looking at this, I have all the data right in front of me, and if something goes wrong, Sam gets an alert, I get an alert, the construction manager gets an alert. This is really thinking about, that's the problem that could have solved Singapore, but in addition to that, you really think about how can it make the construction more efficient? How can it look at the scheduling? Things like eBuilder, how do you work that in? And then in the long run too, it's not just the construction. We as professionals tend to be very siloed looking at the project lifecycle from planning to design to construction to program management, overall operations maintenance. When we actually put these digital systems in today at one phase of the project, how do we think about the entire life cycle to think about, well, how do I transition then from construction to something like CityWorks for asset management, right? So I think really a lot of this is about all of us coming together and figure out what are the problems to solve and how can we partner to do those successfully.
Thanks, Andrew. So, great perspective. So, I will share from our perspective, from an agency perspective, what do we have in the works to be able to mesh it together? Because like you said, we all have to come together for that transformation to happen. So I'll talk about, in general, what do we have coming up in the proposed fiscal year's budget? What are the things that we're looking forward to work on to be able to do what Andrew just pointed out? So I'm going to talk about a lot of numbers and percentages, and those of you who don't like the numbers, my apologies already. But that's the world I come from, so hopefully, I'm able to resonate that in some sort of perspective. So let's talk about OCTA in general initially. So OCTA, we're one entity, but we participate in many roles. Our major function is we're the local sales tax authority in Orange County, and we are one of the major transit provider in Orange County. Our annual budget for the upcoming fiscal year is proposed to be $1.7 billion. For what includes in our roles is our responsibilities towards the freeway system improvements in Orange County, our participation in the local and regional rail. Like I said, we are the transit operator, and we are also managing the express lanes operations in Orange County. So let's talk about our budget a little bit. That's coming up. 25% of our next year's budget is allocated to the freeway improvements projects. Some of you may have seen the Interstate 405 improvements, which is our biggest project. Current cost estimate is about $2.1 billion. It's almost complete, 70% complete with the construction of the express lanes from SR 73 all the way to Interstate 605. So it's a 16-mile stretch of the freeway, including express lanes and reconstruction of several bridges. So that that's been our biggest project in the history. So in our upcoming budget, we're allocating about $400 million for freeway improvements, including SR 55, I-5 improvements in South County, as well as the Interstate 405 improvements. On the transit side, 52% of our budget is allocated to transit, which primarily includes our bus service as well as our share of the subsidy for the Metrolink operations in Orange County. So we're allocating about $330 million towards transit operations, including fixed route service, paratransit services, as well as the microtransit services in Orange County in the next upcoming year. We're looking to renovate our fleet. We have some bus purchases coming up. We're replacing some of our 40-foot buses with the battery electric buses. And one of the projects that I'm hoping that's going to get through the budget this year that I'm personally involved with is our fare collection system. We're looking to modernize our fare collection system with the introduction of smart cards, as well as acquiring a back office system that will help us digitize some of our passes and enable us to introduce new fare policies such as fare capping. Also very proud to be working for an agency that has actually been able to get through youth ride free. So anyone under the age of 18 rides for free on our system. There's no limitation on it, and there's no time limit as far as when it sunsets. So it's in its perpetuity. Very proud to be able to do that. 11% of our budget will be allocated to local streets and roads improvements. What that means is we provide funding to our 34 local cities and the county to be able to improve streets in Orange County. And one of the relative examples for this group is our major investments in the signal synchronization projects that have really relieved the traffic and improved congestion in Orange County. To date, we have implemented 95 signal synchronization projects, easing traffic at about 3,000 intersections in Orange County. So we're very, very proud to be able to do that. And what allows us to do all of this is where I started in the beginning, where I come from. My small role at OCTA is all the revenue that we collect, including our sales tax revenue. Very fortunate to have that. Just like everybody else, we hit a huge decline in our sales tax revenue during pandemic, but we are happy to see the great recovery back again. We are projecting to finish this fiscal year, which is the end of June of this year, at about 25 to 30% higher than what we had projected last year. So very fortunate to have that. Again, very, very happy to get the relief from the 3 stimulus packages that were signed by Congress, injected a lot of money into our transit system, which was definitely hurting. So very happy to have that. And I'll stop there and wait for any other questions that I might get from the group. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speak from the inception, actually, before funding, before collaboration. There's a lot of cities, small cities, medium cities, that are disconnected. How do we get engaged? I represent actually a lot of them, rural cities, small cities. They want to be into the innovation, into the digital connectivity, and they don't even know where to start. So this is a part of my role as a chair of the California Legal Cities, is how do we facilitate those conversations? Is this way, connecting people, agencies, triple Ps with an idea and a concept. There are a lot of cities that start with the concept, hey, we're renovating roads. As we tear the roads, today we don't have money for the broadband, but we're putting the conduit. How do we connect the rural areas to the digital connection? It's again connecting with our counties and our districts to facilitate that conversation and hopefully collaboration, sharing the dollars of how we get there. There are also options. I am actually the vice mayor of a city that is just right on the side of the hill of the Altima Pass, literally miles from the Silicon Valley, and yet we're disconnected. We don't have broadband in our own city, which is literally servicing the San Joaquin County service, the Silicon Valley, and we have all our engineers are not able to afford houses on the other side of the hill, commuting 3 hours over there. So connecting our transportation, having the ability to just put digital connectivity and networking with those business owners. So the moment that those employees get in that train, get in that bus, and they're signing up to work, they're starting to, in the clock. There are so many ways that we just need to connect. It costs very little, but it's just conversations that we need to have between all of us. We are in a pivotal moment, and actually, if anything, COVID has shake us all up to make sure that we have to get an emphasis on this. We have to do it right now. There's no better way, there's no better time than today to start working on digital connectivity. There are resources, there are partnerships. The Triple P has, the triple partnerships have skyrocketed, and I say, good, get working. We have over 460 cities here in California, and half of them are disconnected. What an opportunity to do business. I say, why not? Make a list and let's go on the road and figure out how to bring those communities into the digital connector. I am pleased, actually, in Tracy, we have a lot of rural areas, disconnection areas that we were been working for years with a COG, with MTC. We are connecting to be a mega regional force. So actually, it doesn't only Correnton District, but we are figuring out how to connect a Northern California region to the infrastructure. It's exciting times, and the opportunity is great. So I would love to chat more. I know that we have time, and I don't want to miss the group. So I'll be here for other questions if anybody wants to talk with me later.
I'll comment on a couple things in that. I think what Andrew said with regards to planning, it's going to be important, especially since we're looking at revenue, or not revenues, but grants and other opportunities, right, that are coming down from IIJA, other state funding sources as well, just on EVs. So for street lighting, we actually have one of the largest municipal deployments that we control ourselves for EV chargers. Clearly, Los Angeles and California kind of likes EVs and zero-emission vehicles, if you haven't figured that out yet. That there's going to be a massive kind of planning that we're going to have to do in terms of electrical infrastructure, in terms of some of these things that are going to be multi-use, multi-benefit things. So just echoing the importance of that. I actually want to talk a little bit more on the operational side for just how people generally interact with infrastructure. And I think, to what Mayor Pro Tem was speaking on, that basic connectivity is so important. It's one of the reasons why on our side we had worked, especially with our telecom partners, to accelerate all permits for co-location. Co-location is basically what the name says, putting another object on our streetlight. It's 5G and 4G small cells that we're attaching to our streetlights. We increased that by 2,600% in terms of permits over the course of 2 years, and became one of the first 5G cities in America. That was basic connectivity that was so important during the pandemic, right? When we used hotspots for connecting students, when we digitized most of our services. So just baseline, bottom line, I think thinking about how the infrastructure physically and digitally interact is going to be very important in the future, right? That will lead to other things. One of the other things that we had done during the pandemic was something called Angelino Card. So a few years ago, banking on the unbanked, those that did not have ways to transact or bank accounts, that was a really big thing in LA. It's one of the more derogatory things that they were called is just walking ATMs. People would just cash in their pocket because they didn't have the bank accounts. Well, turns out we actually can partner with some of our friends from MasterCard, for instance, and City Possible that we've worked with. We now have the ability to give every resident their own card, debit card, to no cost to them, so that they can do banking and other transactions with the city. going to other city resources, going to rec and parks, libraries, et cetera. So just looking at all these kind of digital services mixed together, I think will then lead into better interactions for some of the other things that we're doing around infrastructure. So one partnership that we have with our Department of Transportation. So I build things, DOT runs things. We're working on something called Code the Curb, where we're attaching additional sensors and cameras so that we can do more real-time curb management, right? Where you see changes in deliveries and usage patterns and something that might change then more real time. So all these things, I think, kind of have a throughput. There's going to be a place where we have to figure out the resident interaction in addition to some of these capital programs that we're doing.
Thanks, Miguel. One of the things, Andrew, that you said that kind of hit on with me, you talked about this data from Singapore that was in the field, brought back into the back office, somehow plugged into a spreadsheet, and then lost its way, right? Reminds me of one of our favorite sayings is that there is absolutely no problem that Excel can't solve poorly, right? So as a vendor of enterprise capital program management software, Trimble's not a big fan of those types of solutions. But one of the things that, as I was looking into digital transformation, how do you go about a digital transformation process? And there's 5 steps that I'll list here for you. One is identify the goals of the transformation. What do we want to do, right? Second is establish some baseline metrics. Where are we at today? What's happening today? And what needs to be improved on? Then bring in all the stakeholders. So you kind of come up with what's possible, right? By engaging the stakeholders. Then you map out the best scenario. Then you set it live, you set it up, you get it operational, and you monitor it, right? It's all about it. Whatever gets measured gets improved. Whatever gets measured and managed and tracked, people actually work on. So, Andrew, maybe I'll throw it to you with a question about, do you have a story or a client or a program or project where you've seen this type of transformation where people have maybe gone from paper-based systems or even email and spreadsheets to a more digital model that they've set up effectively, or do you have a story you can share around that?
Yeah, sure, Matt. Thanks. I think there's lots of stories, and I look at it. I mentioned earlier, engineers by background are already very data driven, and we can actually probably hack something together that works. And I've seen a lot of places where there's not one in particular that comes to my mind in terms of a good example of how something digital is integrated. What actually I was thinking was when you were talking about digital transformation, what are those different things to look for? My comment here is actually want to think about one of the things is we need to be honest and realistic about where we're at, what respective where is, whatever type of agency or organization you represent, where are your core competencies, right? So I say something like, as an engineering company, I look at, well, let's be honest, we're really good at design, we're really good at engineering, we're not set up to go sell software. We don't have technical support centers and customer agents what you could call, because that is, if you buy any software today, you expect that type of service, and we're really, I think, set up to be custom bespoke type of solution people, right? So I think. Sorry, I know I kind of took a little, I didn't quite answer your question in terms of a good example. I was more so thinking about when you were talking about when you want to achieve digital transformation is kind of realizing where you are within that ecosystem. What are your core competencies and how do you best align that for how you can achieve a broader success, right? So, sorry, I just want to make that comment, not necessarily a specific example.
No problem. So one more thing that I'll share with you I thought was interesting. So some core elements of a digital culture, and something that I've heard repeatedly on the stage today that people are really taking on. So we may not really think of it as a digital transformation, but what I've heard repeatedly from high-speed rail and other agencies that have been up here is promotes an external rather than an internal orientation, right? And we've seen that time and again. Organizations are changing around this industry, and you can see it by the way they behave. Another one is that they prize delegation over control, right? How do we get people involved? How do we get stakeholders plugged in? How do we get people that are, to actually I think it was Bart that said that they're paying people to come in and participate in panels and discussions about what do they need, what do they want, and then encourages boldness over caution, emphasizes more action and less planning, and values collaboration more than individual effort. So if you see these types of things happening within organizations, what you're seeing is digital transformation, right? That's headed the right direction. So I'll open it up. Veronica, I know that you guys have had a lot of experience in your organization at moving things forward, at really taking the ball forward, at getting citizen involvement and engagement. Do you have something to share around that?
I'll share something. There you go. I'll share something to piggyback a Bart that you just mentioned. The forward thinking and collaboration. In 2018, March 2018, Bart, realizing that they were not going to extend their BART system to Livermore and beyond, we created Valley Link Rail. Valley Link Rail is now, after 7 years of perseverance, is part of the state planning, is the link missing between the high-speed rail, the ACE connection, and BART. 42 miles of rail makes a world of difference for a lot of people. Most folks in that region commute about 5 hours a day. Valley Link will connect people to their jobs in less than an hour. Not only that, but a train system that connects with digital, the ability to have Wi-Fi in the train. It is changing, it will change 100,000 people. The Altima Pass actually has over 125,000 cars daily. As congested as any freeway in Southern California. It will transform the Northern California region in one single project. Right now, the CEQA project is completed. They are in the process of a NEPA. They're coordinating with their COGS. They have about $750 million in their commitments. Cities have collaborated and donated land, where one of those 200 acres of donation from one of the communities will create the first hydrogen energy plant. We'll talk about is in the middle of a 300 acres of inland port that connects the two ports, Oakland and Stockton, together. It's truly an innovative, forward-thinking project that will actually connect the need of clean energy being generated in this 200 acres, truck systems that were moving through the green energy, and by the way, it's green hydrogen, connecting to other communities like EBCE, Plug. They're looking into who to partner up to run the energy concept, because the Valley Link is a rail district, not an energy producer. So it's just collaborating, being able to just be that voice, a shipper through a region that will actually be innovating enough to just make sure that the infrastructure changes the entire dynamic of about 15 cities with one project. So as you mentioned, Miguel, before, is how we collaborate, how we connect. It's just one thing, it's just have that cycle effect that just transform the quality of life of hundreds of thousands of people. I will say, stay put, collaborate with others. Money is always a challenge, but that is secondary to the idea and to the forward thinking of having the planning in place. Do the planning, don't be afraid of the monies or how you're gonna get it done. Once you have it going, it comes. It really does. So I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Sam. Nothing happens until people pay for it, right? You're in charge of revenue at Orange County Transit. What are you guys doing to transform the way that people are actually paying you guys? Your revenue model has changed some, right? Can you talk some about that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt, and thanks for sharing your perspective. Just a little bit of history. I used to work in San Joaquin, and it's amazing to see how priorities have shifted over time. And I'm really happy to see that we are actually looking at different ways to connect people and get people from one place to another, right? Because that's what gives you the satisfaction of working in the field of transportation is you try and make better improvements to people's life. You try to get to them from one place to another. And if you can make that 10-minute difference, if you can cut that 5-hour commute into 2 hours, that's great. So yeah, kudos to you for doing all that. Back in the days, we used to wear a hat that says widen 205 now. I'm sure that slogan has changed.
It hasn't.
But I'm happy to see the other alternatives in place, right? So thanks to you, and thanks to everybody else who's been working on it.
I can't take the credit. It's a bunch of people working with me on this.
I can see that. But no, to answer your question, how we're bringing revenue and how we are transforming, our presence into the future in the way of thinking, the way we do things. I think one of the primary examples is, I touched on it in a little bit, is the Youth Ride Free program that we implemented at OCTA. We're using the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program dollars, which are provided by the state. It's costing us over $2 million a year. But again, it depends on every agency to set the priorities to see, where are you going to make those investments and improvements to see the future. And how we see it is if we train our youth that's currently trying to rely on every other system except our buses, then we're not steering them in the right direction. If we can get them to ride our system and learn our system early, and we will have them forever. We hope so. Or we will have them as a long-term riders. So we saw an opportunity, we're investing into it, and that's where we're focusing our revenues. One of the other examples I mentioned a little bit is we're going to try and modernize. It's proposed in our budget, and nothing's final as of now, but we're trying to introduce smart cards. LA Metro has it, MTC has a system where you can provide a lot more incentives and provide alternative fare media types to your riders to be able to ride the system. Currently, the major way we have to collect that revenue is really just the cash. So 60% of our fare revenues are collected on our buses as cash, and less than 10% is actually on mobile ticketing. So we are trying to do our fair share of, trying to move in the technology in that direction where we can provide more ways to our customers to be able to ride the system. And hopefully acquiring a back office system in future will enable us to provide more incentives to our riders so that they can continue to ride the system. And of course, we are the owner and operators of the 91 express lanes in Orange County. We've had that responsibility for a long time now, and we're looking forward to opening the 405 express lane operations in very near future. We collect about 50 million. We're anticipating to collect about 50 million in the 91 express toll lanes, and we certainly are very proud to be able to put it in the right direction. So we hope we're doing our part.
And Miguel, kind of a pop quiz for you. I should have prepared you for this one, but something just popped into my head as far as a question for what you guys are doing. The 5G and 4G small cell sites, the impact that had. Do you have some statistics? I mean, there must be hundreds of thousands or millions of people that access that use that, and terabytes of data every day. Can you share something about the scope of that impact?
Well, I'll say something else rather than the impact. I think a challenge is what I'm going to say. Clearly, it's been improving services throughout the entirety of the city. I think a challenge is that some of the places, though, that we really need greater investment, some of the things that are going to be targeted by, again, federal and state grant dollars in the future when it comes to disadvantaged communities, still are disconnected. right? So you have 10% of households, upwards of 20, depending on where you're going in South LA. You go to Pacific Palisades, it's 2%, right? So you have adoption rates, you have other things with regards to infrastructure that we're going to have to kind of think about on how all those interactions will come. And by the way, when we're talking about digitization of our services, city services, any type of services, that's going to be a whole new kind of divide. As you know, if the neighborhoods are not connected, then how will you get an automated bus kind of through there, or some other thing, right? Some other piece of technology. Someone else will think about the future I'm thinking about right now. But in terms of that, those are going to be some of the challenges I think we face for the city. So to your point, actually, and I just wanted to make this comment, and I swear I'll answer your question too at some point. But with regards to internal digital transformation, that's a lot of pressure that we can just apply on our workforce, right? And to an extent, we can generally fake it till you make it, and teach people and just be persistent about the skills and knowledge needed in order to become more digital. On the outside, it's a completely different mindset. And that is one where it's going to take a whole new slew of thinking, a whole new type of interactions from what we're doing in terms of resident interactions, how we're actually transacting, et cetera, that will start changing then and making it so that the digital results in something else than just something being better built. It needs to operate better, right? And so those, I think, are some challenges that I'm just highlighting. We have, again, faster speeds through half the city for what we've done with regards to some of these connections for wireless. It still doesn't help, right? Those that remain disconnected are the ones that we're actually targeting.
Sounds good. So we've got 5 minutes left here, and we'll open it up to the floor. If you guys have questions, we'd love to have your questions. The only thing I'll ask you to keep in mind is whatever questions you ask, it's all that keeps you from lunch. So, any questions from the audience? Everyone is hungry. I agree. Well, listen, great panel today. Thanks you guys for your contributions, and give them a round of applause.